I'm Mort Kondracke.
And I'm Fred Barnes, and we're the Beltway Boys. Hot story, Mort, is Reaganomics. That's Obama's economic policy. And look, as we enter into 2009, there is nothing that matters more at the beginning of the new Obama administration than how he's going to deal with the recession. Here, watch this, and you'll see sort of broadly what he's thinking about. Watch.
We can create millions of jobs, starting with a 21st century economic recovery plan that puts Americans to work building wind farms, solar panels, and fuel-efficient cars. We can spark the dynamism of our economy through a long-term investment in renewable energy that will give life to new businesses and industries with good jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced.
The last president who faced this kind of an economic crisis when he entered office, of course, was Ronald Reagan in 1981. And we're old enough to have known Ronald Reagan and have covered his White House when he was going through this. And he obviously had rising unemployment and negative economic growth. In other words, the economy was shrinking. He had a couple of problems that Obama does not face. One of them was sky-high interest rates, and the other was rising inflation. But they're roughly similar.
Yeah. Well, look, the problem that Obama faces coming in is there are 10.3 million people out of work at the moment, 6.7% unemployment rate, which is not as high as it got to be during the Reagan administration, which was 10.8% in 1982. But there are lots of people who think that it's going to get up to double digits. And, you know, the reason that President Bush got off of free market economics to fight this thing was that he was warned by Hank Paulson that this could be a depression worse than the Great Depression. So the Fed and the Treasury Department have thrown so far $8 trillion at the banking system. And what Obama was elected to do was to help the victims of this, the people who are unemployed, losing their houses, and so on. And there are even some conservative economists like Martin Feldstein who think that what Obama's got to do is have stimulus that's equivalent to the Great Depression. I mean, to World War II, which is what got us out of the Great Depression, because the Great Depression did not end until World War II started.
Indeed. Okay. So here's how President-elect Obama's plan differs from Ronald Reagan's plan back in the early 80s. First of all, Obama wants to increase spending on infrastructure, aid to states, and so on. Ronald Reagan cut spending except for defense spending. And more, you know, I'm actually surprised that Obama, given his advisors, people like Larry Summers, is devoting his stimulus package almost entirely to government spending aimed at creating jobs. This is what Franklin Roosevelt did in the Depression in the 1930s. And the truth was, you wound up at the end of the 1930s about where you were when Roosevelt took over the economy after FDR used this approach of just government spending. It didn't work. It didn't, as you said. The Depression ended in World War II.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know for sure whether the Obama plan is going to work, but, Fred, Ronald Reagan did not cut spending net. I mean, it went from, or much anyway, it went from 21.7% of GDP when he took office to 21.2% of GDP when he left. And some years it was as high as 23%. So there was not a lot of net spending cuts. And he did spend a lot more on defense. That's true. But what is the difference in terms of economics just between spending on bombs and planes and ships and stuff like that and spending it on roads, bridges, and wind farms? I don't think that there is a lot of difference.
Yeah, but that's not the important distinction, Mort, because secondly, Obama wants to cut taxes mainly just for the middle class, and for people who pay no tax at all, they'll get a check. Ronald Reagan fought for across-the-board tax cuts for individuals, including the rich and the wealthy, and also for corporations, and gave them accelerated depreciation. And that's the difference. Obama's relying entirely on government spending. Reagan relied on the jobs that were created by the private sector. He applied incentives, you know. Have you heard the word incentive? You haven't heard that word much from Obama's lips. He rarely mentions it, and never in connection with tax cuts. So there's a great difference. Obama, it's government spending, and Reagan, it's tax cuts to spur investment and economic growth.
Yeah,
and it worked.
Look, when Reagan came in, the top tax rate was 70%. That's practically confiscatory. So there was every reason to cut across the board. And I will stipulate right now that Obama should, and he has not done this, say right now, I am not going to cut taxes on, raise taxes on anybody in the midst of a recession. I mean, it clearly is, it's counter-Keynesian even. Now, I'm sure that there, or I would like to think anyway, that there will be some tax breaks in this package for private investment in wind farms and solar panels and even nuclear, I would hope. And Ronald Reagan's tax cuts, didn't go down, didn't decrease government revenues by a great deal. What he did was expand the deficit. I mean, the deficit went way up as a percentage of GDP. And I would argue that what Ronald Reagan ultimately did was to give the economy a Keynesian kick in the pants. It was deficit spending.
Mort, what he did was, with his tax cuts, was expand the economy. And that's what we're talking about right in the beginning, in 81 and 82. By early 83 or even late 82, the economy was booming. We had one of the great...
It was a short, shallow recession. I mean, it was a short, deep recession. It was a short, deep recession. Yeah. This one looks to be a long one.
And why was it short? Because Reagan's policy worked almost instantly. Anyway, the next area where the two, Obama and Reagan, disagree is this. Obama has shown he favors more unions or more unionization, while Ronald Reagan was famously anti-union. And of course, one of the things he did in 1981 was kill the air controllers strike and bring in private people, non-union people to run it. It had a tremendous impact. And Mort, the simple fact is, over the last 25, 30 years, as unions have declined, we've had more productivity and greater economic growth.
Well, this is
I think the two go together.
This is one area where I completely agree with you. I'm afraid that Obama is going to cave completely to the unions on card check, which will make it practically impossible not to have a union.
Right.
And unions do reduce the efficiency of an enterprise. I think he's going to give on free trade, and we're going to have more than prevailing wage rates. In other words, union rates for all these infrastructure programs, which is going to mean that you're going to build less roads and less bridges as a result of it. So on that point, I completely agree with you.
I'll put you down in the anti-union camp. And finally, President-elect Obama is signaling he wants more regulation. Former President Reagan was for deregulation. And regulation, look, makes it tougher for business. Look at Sarbanes-Oxley, what that did after the Enron scandal. It just, filled up these poor corporations with this huge paperwork obligation. Anyway, more regulation. The truth is that the financial markets are self-regulating. Now, it took a huge financial meltdown to get them to do it, but they are.
Look, deregulation is partly what got us into this catastrophic mess that we're in. I mean, even you will admit that that the Democrats failed to go along with regulation of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, contributing to this. Well, there's a lot more that should have been regulated, and the SEC and other regulators should have been much tougher in enforcing the regulations that they were. So that means there should be more regulation, just not too much.
Simply put, Mort, Reaganomics worked, got us out of that recession. The FDR model, which Obama seems like he's going to follow, didn't work. All right.
Bottom line, they were both Keynesian, and we'll see if they work.
Please. Coming up.